Welcome to another edition of Line of Sight. And if you're curious about why it is that you should be listening as an HR, organization development, or training professional, it's this one simple fact that based on our research, we've seen that the difference between the winners and losers in organizations is not going to be price or even product. It's going to be the customer experience. And the only way to leverage, drive, increase, improve the customer experience is that each and every one of your employees understands their line of sight to the customer, how they impact gaining and retaining customers. So today we want to talk about the notion that for the most part, your people, our employees, don't understand why what they do matters to gaining and retaining more customers. So what if we were training people in the gaining and retaining more customers, helping to increase the meaningfulness of their role, giving them a clear understanding of why what they do matters? It'll increase the level of their own accountability because it helps people think about their choices and their actions.
Anil, it's a refreshing, really, way to look at this. It's so easy for the people who work with us and for us to become compartmentalized, where we start to focus on what we do instead of who we do it for. And to expound on what you said earlier, which is a salient point, that by that year, 2020, that the customer experience will far outweigh both product and price as the number one brand differentiator in the market. With line of sight is how does each and every person contribute to that customer experience? It's very easy to take a look at a restaurant as a microcosm example. And one of the things we have to do in the learning department is first get a little bit of self-awareness and know what kind of restaurant are we really involved in. Because if we are involved in maybe a more fast food type of restaurant where the people who are working in that restaurant have to focus on doing something very well and repeating it and doing it over and over again because that's what the customer experience demands, that's how our learning should be structured. And if we're in a top flight restaurant, maybe the focus is on innovation. And our learning has to reflect what that customer experience should be. So no matter what the restaurant is, there still has to be people who serve the food. There still has to be people who create the food, create the menus. There still has to be people who cook the food. And there still have to be people who manage the space. So the answer to the question of who interacts with the customer should be I do. Because everyone should understand how they contribute to that customer experience.
That's really well said, Peter. And I would actually go a step beyond that people need to understand how they impact the customer. They actually have to have a clear understanding of how their actions, their choices, even the conversations that they have internally impact whether or not customers are making a decision about, should I continue to do business with this organization? Should I start to do business with this organization? Imagine, if you will, an accounting department. And for the most part, accountants are pretty far removed from gaining and retaining customers, at least in many organizations. But if they don't think about how their processes impact customers, then they may try to make things more efficient for themselves, which is great when they're trying to leave the office by 4:30. But it may not be so good when they're trying to reimburse a customer for a failed product or to pay a vendor for a piece of information that is vital to the customer. So it's important that we help our employees, our leaders, our managers, our supervisors have an understanding of what is that impact on the customer experience? So how do we start that? How do we even begin to create training that enables that customer experience?
Anil, that's really the question at hand, isn't it? And start with a discussion about business case to support why it's so important. In 2014, U.S. businesses lost $41 billion in sales due to poor customer service. And in that same survey, they found that 65% of these people said that they were willing to leave a brand because of one poor customer experience. So we see there's no question that the stakes are high. So if you're a learning professional, here's a simple step that you can take immediately. When we're designing training, instead of starting with the premise of, well, what's the problem? What's the skill we're trying to develop? We firmly believe we have to start with the question, what is the experience? What is the customer experience we are trying to create with this learning? That's the first and most pressing question to answer.
And if we start with that question, then the type of training, the length of training, the tools that we're using to deliver the training, they're all going to be dictated based on how it's going to impact that customer experience. So if we simply change our perspective about where to start, then the impact of the final product isn't going to be whether or not people enjoyed the training or whether or not people give us a 5 out of 5 whether they'd recommend the training or not. It'll literally enable that person that attended the training to understand, how do I get more people to come into my line as a cashier? How do I understand how to explain artisan bread as an employee in the bakery department? How do I complete a electronics testing so that not only does the product test properly, but that I do it in a way that is efficient and effective? So it's always going to be about the focus of, how do I, as the entry-level employee, as the janitor, as the supervisor, as the CEO, help gain and retain more customers for our organization?
And Anil, there's an old adage that if you start with what's important, the rest will find its place. We start with that, and the rest of our good training and the information we've created doesn't have to be thrown away. It will find its right place. People will pick and choose and grab things that they know will help them with the customer experience, and will start to ignore things that don't help with that experience, saving us time, saving us money, and helping people to laser in on what's important, which is gaining and retaining new customers.
Absolutely, Peter. And so if you're not sure about how to start addressing the issue of enabling your training to help people find their way in gaining and retaining more customers, we strongly suggest that you find somebody that does. Maybe the first step is to download our brochure that explains a little bit about how you can begin this approach. And if you're curious about how to use it, or you have any questions on how you might want to do that, don't hesitate to contact us at our email addresses below.
And look forward to our next webinar, where we talk more about this concept of the customer experience in line of sight.